Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel. I'm your host, Sam Fain, and I am talking today about Better Tomorrow 3, Love and Death in Saigon. This is the third part of the Better Tomorrow trilogy that was recently released by Shout Factory in their Hong Kong Cinema Classics box set, 4K Ultra HD. These are volumes 19, 20, and 21. Of course, the box set's right there behind me, and this is the single disc. But not single disc. There's actually 3 discs in here, but this is the single case for Better Tomorrow 3, Love and Death in Saigon. And we can that open, take a look in there. And then, of course, you have the 3 discs. The Blu-ray's not in here right now. I was just finishing up the audio commentary on that. But you get the 4K Ultra HD disc. You get the Blu-ray, which has, of course, the special features on there. The 4K Ultra HD, of course, has the audio commentary, just not the other special features. And then you get the bonus disc, which includes the Taiwanese cut of A Better Tomorrow 3, which has about 7 minutes of extra footage, extended scenes, etc. I haven't watched that yet, but I will get into that at some point. And then it also, of course, has the work print version of A Better Tomorrow 2, which is something that I'm very much looking forward to. In fact, a commenter on the channel mentioned that they much preferred that version of the film, thought that it absolutely was the right cut of the film, if you will, and that the sort of butchered version that Tsui Hark kind of enforced on John Woo, kind of like I was saying in our last review, a bit of a mess. And that the work print definitely fleshes things out and helps to solidify the plot so that it's not just really all about that third act and the huge shootout at the end. Not that that's a horrible distillation of kind of my feelings on the film. There's a lot to love about that film, a lot to love about Chow Yun-fat in particular in that film, but also Leslie Chung and T Long as well, and Dean Sheck, who's fantastic in it. But go check out the review of Better Tomorrow 2 if you haven't yet for my full thoughts on that film. But again, we're going to be talking about A Better Tomorrow 3, Love and Death in Saigon. I'm going to switch things up just a little bit and talk about the technical merits and the special features, because I know that that's something too that commenters have asked for. I'm working on timestamps on previous videos, and I will definitely have one on this video. There was the timestamps on the Better Tomorrow 2 review video as well, so hopefully that helped people find what they were looking for if they didn't necessarily want to watch my full review, which I get it. I talk a lot. For those of you that have stuck around and watched the full videos, thank you. You're awesome. You're wonderful. Make sure you've liked, subscribed, hit the notification bell, all the stuff that the YouTubers say that you need to do in order to make sure that people see the video, blah, 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 blah. But I'm glad you're here. I really appreciate you tuning in and coming on this ride with me. And it's vastly different from a lot of stuff that I've done on the channel before, and I'm certainly trying to build steam with these new releases, particularly from Shout Factory. It's funny, I've actually now this will be the 4th release from Shout Factory, and with The Killer coming in this week, I'll be reviewing that as soon as it hits my hands. And so I can't wait to dig into that one as well. But I guarantee you we're going other places besides these Shout Factory Hong Kong Cinema Classics, and we'll certainly be talking about a lot of other films. There's a lot of Hong Kong movies to talk about, though. I do have a love for the cinema of Hong Kong, and there's a lot of films that I own that I've even recently gotten in. In fact, I'll show a couple of those here in just a moment. But we're going to be talking about an array of different films. And I also have my retro unboxing review of Star Wars, the motion picture. Star Wars. That's not right. Star Trek, the motion picture in 4K Ultra HD, as a part of my support for Albie over at the Trexploration podcast and his GoFundMe to get his daughter Serenity to space camp, which is going very, very well. If you can, definitely support that. There'll be a link below. But of course, that video, of course, will be about that as well. I also have some other exciting stuff coming up, including a collaboration with Fandom Entanglement. And JJ Lindell joined me for that. Of course, artist extraordinaire. Not only did he do that poster right there for Quantum Leap, but he designed my logo. JJ's awesome, and he and I have a couple of other things cooked up that we'll be doing very soon as well. Oh, he also did that Twilight Zone poster, which I absolutely love. But we actually did an episode on the Night of the Meek. So check that out on the channel as well if you're interested in the Twilight Zone. Okay. Enough of that. Let's talk about the technical merits of this particular 4K Ultra HD / Blu-ray package. First of all, the film looks amazing. In fact, I would argue that with the exception of a couple of just source material defects that do seem to run and pop up every once in a while in the film, including some lines that you'll see across the film, that this one probably looks consistently the best of all three movies. I still think that A Better Tomorrow, like the first film overall, from start to finish, is probably the most revelatory in a lot of ways. But just due to, I think, Tsui Hark's overall directorial choices, the cinematography, the editing, etc., that this film just looks so good. The picture quality is incredible. Sound quality is great. And one of the things that you do run into, of course, with these Hong Kong films is because sound was always recorded after the fact, they were not recorded with live sound, is that sometimes the soundtracks can be a little bit flat. That said, the special effects, if you will, the Foley work that's done definitely pops where it needs to pop. And overall, the film looks and sounds great in the 4K Ultra HD format. So much so that when comparing this to the Blu-ray, it is immediately noticeable the bump in quality that you get from the 4K Ultra HD. It looks brilliant. If you're expecting it to look like, Avengers Endgame, you're going to be sorely disappointed. But if you're looking for a 36-year-old film to look way better than it ever has, and perhaps even has any right to look, this is definitely the presentation that you want. Film grain looks fantastic. It's persistent. It's never overwhelming. Blacks are black. Everything, the colors and separation of colors, everything seems distinct and wonderful. There's been no DNR that I can tell. There's been no overuse of DNR. That is, there's been no AI scrubbing or anything like that. It just looks phenomenal. And there are certainly moments in the film, even early on, where just right away, looking at Anita Moy's face, seeing Chow Yun-fat outside the prison, Tony Leung in the prison, there's some really wonderful moments early on where skin just looks so incredibly vibrant and real, like you can almost just reach out and touch it. And the film overall, again, just looks fantastic. There are a couple of noticeable defects that I can only assume are in the source material. There's no reason why some of these lines would run through a restoration or anything, but I can only assume that those were something that they just couldn't fix, get rid of, remove. And I don't mind that sort of stuff at all. It's never bothered me to see things like that. It doesn't take me out of the picture. I know I'm watching a movie. I appreciate the film from the way that it looks, even beyond any of those defects. In fact, when watching the trailer, I appreciated all the nicks and scratches and wobbles and everything. It's just like that's film. It feels real. It feels like something that you can touch. It's tangible. So I don't necessarily mind that sort of thing. If you do, your mileage may vary on a couple of instances in the film, but again, they're not distracting and they are far and few between. Overall, it looks amazing. The presentation is fantastic. Let's talk about the special features. You got the audio commentary with David West. This audio commentary is very different from the audio commentaries from James Mudge, whereas Mudge is a very rapid fire, gets a lot out. David West is definitely a little bit more laid back, a little bit slower. This is definitely the type of audio commentary you can put on to fall asleep to. No offense to David West, because it is also incredibly informative and offers so many valuable insights, not only into the making of this film, but also into the personalities involved in the movie, of course, Chow Yun-fat, Anita Moy especially, Tony Leung, Tsui Hark, of course. John Woo is obviously mentioned numerous times, even though he was not directly involved with the making of this film in any way. And then the political undercurrents of the film, the historical undercurrents of the film. He does this wonderful thing, which I always used to try to do whenever we were reviewing or talking about Quantum Leap on this show, was to contextualize the film not only within the time it was made, but also within the time it was set and within the time that he was viewing it now. And I think that, that the way that he is able to do that is really quite wonderful. And there are a couple of other supplements on the Blu-ray that do the same thing. One in particular, which is an incredible supplement that I'm so thrilled that they included, and I'll get to that one. I'll save sort of the best for last, if you will. I'm going to read off the back of here just to make sure I get everything right, and also hope that my eyes don't fail me here. That's what happens when you hit your 40s. All right, so we have also Third Time Lucky, which are interviews with screenwriter Yu Ming Long and Fu Ho Tai. Now, this is a really, really enlightening special feature, because one of the first things that it does is it dispels any sort of misinformation that does seem to be out there. I've seen it in a number of places on the internet, quite frankly, that John Woo wrote this movie. John Woo did not write this movie. John Woo came up with an original story idea, and he did write a script, which that script ended up becoming Bullet in the Head. This film was written completely independent of that. While the story idea was definitely John Woo's, the screenplay itself is not John Woo's screenplay. In fact, it was basically written via committee, if you will. There was a writers group that got together and wrote this film, with Tsui Hark, of course, providing valuable insight. They even talk about a table read that was done with Chow Yun-fat and Anita Moy only, just the two of them and the screenwriters. So it was really fascinating, really wonderful look into not only, of course, the production of this film, but just the way Tsui Hark works when it comes to screenwriting in general. After a third time lucky, we have the Hong Kong Confidential with Grady Hendrix. Grady's always fun to listen to. It does a wonderful job talking about the film, especially from the perspective of this movie and these stars and this creative team. It's a really great piece, as have been the other Hong Kong Confidential pieces on here, and I highly recommend it. All Are Tomorrow is an interview with Hong Kong filmmaker and academic Gilbert Poe. Great piece. Really enjoyed this piece. It's definitely, kind of a streamlined, Better Tomorrow 1, 2, 3 remakes, offshoots, etc. He talks about films that aren't even included on this box set, almost as if they were included on this box set. But I really appreciated his perspective a great deal, and it really hangs a nice timeline on the films based off of when they were made, and the impact that they have had throughout the past nearly 40 years now since the first movie was made. And then my favorite special feature on this disc is Nam Flashbacks, an interview with Vietnam War researcher Dr. Aurelia Bashe Novaset. I hope I got that right. I'm sure I didn't. She's brilliant, erudite, succinct, clearly an academic, not in terms of like being dry at all, because she is not, but an academic in such that she can convey so much in so little. She's the type of professor that I would have loved to have had in college, where in 50 minutes you are going to get your money's worth. You are going to understand something. You're going to learn something. You're going to get some great contextualization for history, and in a way that you could read a 500-page book, and you should read that 500-page book, but they're going to be able to distill it down into those bullet points in just a fantastic way to help convey a lot of meaning and erudition, and she does it so well. And I think that this special feature was honestly the one that I was most hungry for after seeing the film, because while I felt like I have a pretty decent working knowledge of the Vietnam War and the socio-political climate during the 60s and early 70s in Vietnam, based off of my own readings, as she points out a number of times in this, so much of that is slanted towards the American experience and through a US lens. And while I try to broaden that perspective, at the same time, the truth is that most of what I have to go off of is US produced. It's in English. And so having the opportunity to get her perspective, especially as it relates to the film and to the film's own perspective and its own lens, was fascinating, wonderful. Highly, highly recommend you check out that special feature if you own this box set. And I would go so far as to say it's one of those types of special features that make owning a box set like this worth it. I genuinely mean that. I loved the John Woo interviews on the other two. I love so much of the other special features on here as well, but that special feature is exceptional, and it's the type of special feature that I wish we got more of and were produced more regularly on films, especially films that clearly touch on such a moment in time that deserves to have a little bit of extra light shed on it, especially in the context of the film. So there you have it. Looks amazing, sounds amazing, special features are great. This thing gets some of my highest marks possible. I really, really, really loved it. And I think it's going to be very hard for me to put this disc above the first film for many, many reasons. However, my immediate initial reaction is this is my favorite one of the bunch, all told, whole package. When you put the film, the special features, everything together, my favorite one of the bunch. Now, is the film itself my favorite one of the bunch? Well, let's find out. A Better Tomorrow 3, Love and Death in Saigon came out in October of 1989. Now, the reason why I mention this is because not only is that 3 years after the first film was made, which by today's standards seems like a quick turnaround for a sequel, but especially in Hong Kong in that day and age, the time between A Better Tomorrow 1 and A Better Tomorrow 2 was less than a year. So when you look at the turnaround time between those two films and this film, it's a much longer creative process, perhaps. And one of the reasons for that is because of the falling out between Tsui Hark and John Woo. And while those tensions started, it seems, in during the production of A Better Tomorrow 2, they really came to a head during The Killer, in which point they just completely separated, and not only professionally but personally as well, were no longer on speaking terms. So at this point, knowing that a movie like A Better Tomorrow 3 needed to be made, and that Tsui Hark kind of owned the film, if you will, as the producer of the first two, he decided to take over the directorial efforts for it, while John Woo went off and made A Bullet in the Head, which was basically his version of the story. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. So it's no longer about Mark. It's a completely different film. And we'll talk about that film later, because it's also getting a 4K release as a part of this Hong Kong Cinema Classics label in January. So stay tuned, because we'll definitely dive into that one. That's another one that I've not seen in a long time. It's been great to revisit these films, because again, most of them I've not seen in 20 years. All right, so Better Tomorrow 3, Love and Death in Saigon. Let's talk about the film itself, since we've gotten through the technical merits already and the special features. This film was directed, co-written, and co-produced by Tsui Hark, who of course is the producer behind the first two films, and it is loosely based on John Woo's own script for the prequel. It was actually, believe it or not, this is the movie that John Woo wanted to make after A Better Tomorrow. He didn't really want to do A Better Tomorrow 2, but was kind of convinced to shift things and use the twin brother as opposed to doing a prequel. The script that John Woo wrote would later be repurposed for Bullet in the Head, and this script was not a John Woo script, which I know is something that has actually been put out there on the internet and a couple of other places. I saw, script by John Woo, and it's like, that's not actually 100% true. So this was written by Tsui Hark and his writing group, which of course is detailed in one of the special features on the Blu-ray. The film stars Chow Yun-fat, of course, who is reprising his role of Mark. We also get Tony Leung Ka-fai and Anita Mui rounding out the trio. Now, Tony Leung is not the same Tony Leung, obviously, from Hard Boiled. This is Big Tony. The Tony Leung in Hard Boiled is Little Tony. That's the appellation that was given them to by the press over in Hong Kong. Anita Mui, of course, a huge pop star, had starred in a number of comedies and a couple of maybe melodramas and stuff before A Better Tomorrow 3, but had never done anything like this before. And she's brilliant. She's incredible in the film. I love the character of Kit. I love what she does in the film. She looks so radiant. She's so charismatic. She's so cool. The first time we see her walking off the plane in the shades and the duster, she looks sort of like the gender swapped version of Alain Delon's samurai character in Le Samurai, the Melville film. So like just incredible, absolutely incredible throughout the movie. And I think this really shifted the public's perception of her based off of what I've heard and read and what she could do. And she would continue to do quite well, and was just such a huge star for a number of years until her untimely passing in 2003, I believe. We also get Kin Shek in the role of Uncle, Mun's father. And I think that the audiences would have been super familiar with him. Western audiences will be familiar with him as Han from Enter the Dragon, the villain from Enter the Dragon. But he had been starring in films, mostly playing the heavy, for at this point like 40 years, and a number of different genres: wuxia films, kung fu films, crime films. He actually played the villain in Story of a Discharged Prisoner, which was the inspiration for the first Better Tomorrow film, which I thought was fascinating. And he brings such warmth to the role. There's just something about him, and I think the gravitas that he's able to bring to the role. He's exceptional in the film, and I think serves as just an important element to the movie, and is able to convey so much with so little, which is just the hallmark of any great seasoned, experienced actor. And he's wonderful in the film. And I think his relationship with all the characters is quite great. Saburo Tokito plays Sam Ho Chung, also known as Tanaka, who we don't meet until late in the film, but we hear about early on in the film, because it's Kit's lover and sort of mentor figure who got her into the criminal side of things. She was a singer in a nightclub. She saved his life. They became partners, both professionally and personally. And he has escaped to Holland to avoid death, basically, and is now living there, although she hasn't heard from him in quite some times. There's rumor he could be dead. So it's a part of the story, obviously. But he is quite remarkable in the role. He's a Japanese actor. He'd done very well in Japan. He'd already been in a Hong Kong film before. But I think Tsui Hark's choice to use this actor and to have this storyline element in the film is really incredible. And it lends itself to the idea that this is a multi-ethnic region in South Vietnam is, and we have the Vietnamese, we have the Chinese, we have Japanese, and of course there's American soldiers there. The French have been there before. There's this really interesting tapestry of ethnicities and human beings living in this city, this country, and it's a crucial part, I think, to the subtext and the themes of the film. Again, really important, I think, the political aspects of the film, the historical context of the film. It's 1974 in Hong Kong and mainland China. We're in the midst of Mao's Cultural Revolution. Now, of course, not in Hong Kong, but it has its effect, obviously, on Hong Kong, just because they're so closely related. The war in Vietnam, from a Western perspective, is winding down. The Americans have pulled out. The last Americans will leave in 75, but 73 has already seen kind of de-escalation. The North Vietnamese are seemingly kind of on their way down to take over South Vietnam. You have student protesters in South Vietnam that want a united Vietnam, but not necessarily the same united Vietnam that North Vietnamese want. So there's all sorts of this backdrop, this rich historical backdrop to the film, and the way it plays into the themes and the subtext of the film is quite brilliant. And I think that even the way the film is shot adds even more credence to that. The almost documentary style filmmaking that takes place when we see the student protesters early on and their clashes with the military. We see the bomb that the girls on the motorbike toss, and then of course they're gunned down. All in the midst of seeing Mark free his cousin from prison through peaceful means, and then they watch these girls just gunned down in the streets. We're seeing banners like USA Go Home, Free One Vietnam, again, it's painting this picture of this country in turmoil. And I think the way that these characters, that these people, these human beings are affected by that is crucial to the understanding of the film and these characters. The way that they kind of get brought together, and it's interesting, especially from the perspective of Chow Yun-fat's Mark and Anita Moy's Kit, the way that they are, together when we first see them. They don't know one another at all, but they're walking off this airplane together. That they have this sort of almost meet cute where he finds her lipstick. But because he swallowed a cigarette, long story, he can't actually speak to her, so he just hands her the lipstick. But in the midst of that, because he's getting cajoled into this customs room to be strip searched, basically, she only gets the bottom half of the lipstick. He still has the cap, and we're met with corrupt officials. We're seeing him go to get Mun out of jail, reunite with Uncle Mun's father. But then, we come back to Kit later. We see her again, and they meet up with her at a nightclub. And there's just this the way that these characters keep kind of coming apart and then coming back together. It's really kind of fascinating, and that is a hallmark of the relationship between Kit and Mark in particular. That there's this distance between them, and yet when they are together, they seem so. It's so charged. It's like this chemistry that the actors have as well, but the characters, it's just palpable. And again, Chow Yun-fat and Anita Moy are incredible in the film. And we get a very different Chow Yun-fat in this film compared to the other two movies, which I loved. It's remarkable because he does come off younger. He comes off not naive, but certainly less experienced. He comes off maybe a little bit more optimistic, a little bit more hopeful. There's a little bit more of a goofy quality to him. It's not too far. We saw some goofiness from him in the prior films for sure, but that goofiness was always kind of like there was confidence, a coolness, a charm about the goofiness. Whereas this is he's just goofy. He's just kind of goofy. And because of that, he is charming, as opposed to he's a charming man being goofy. This is somebody who's goofy, and because they're goofy, they're charming, which is interesting to see. We see the character kind of get stripped down to his essence, distilled down until he has to make a choice. And he chooses vengeance, he chooses retribution, and he uses the experiences that this film have taught him to kind of make that move. But he's still not the Mark that we see in the first Better Tomorrow film, and that's another thing that I think is brilliant about this in terms of it being a prequel, because of when it ends, there's still a decade to go before we get to a Better Tomorrow. And so because of when it ends, we don't necessarily see the same Mark, that there's still a journey that has to be taken. You almost wonder if there was ever plans to do a follow-up. I don't think that there was. It sounds like Tsui Hark at one point wanted to do like a futuristic science fiction follow-up to the story, which is fascinating. I appreciate that this is not, it's not Mark, from Better Tomorrow, that there's still a ways to go before he gets there, but we're seeing the genesis of why, what sets him down that path, what gives him some of those tools, who gives him the duster and the sunglasses and teaches him how to shoot guns. It's Kit. It's Anita Moy's Kit. And Anita Moy, again, she's so brilliant and so effortless in this film. I love the character. I love the agency she's given. I love the obstacles that are put in her way of that agency at times. This is someone who is a huge pop star, just a huge pop star. I know that she gets compared to Madonna by one of the commentators, I believe. I personally wanted to make like a Barbra Streisand comparison, but that doesn't really track either. Maybe she meets somewhere in between, but she's this huge pop star, singing idol. She has starred in numerous films before this movie, has been awarded for both of her film and singing career. But this is a very, very different type of role for her, and she embraced it. She really wanted to dive into it. She had a hand in not necessarily creating the character, but certainly creating the look of the character, and worked with her hairdresser and her makeup team to kind of like craft this look that was different from the look that she normally had. And I just think she's brilliant in the movie. And again, I think she has such exceptional chemistry with Chow Yun-fat, that their sort of doomed romance and the pseudo love triangle with Michael, Tony Leung's character, is really, it's just the nucleus of the film, and the trio is obviously once again the nucleus of the film, much like it was in A Better Tomorrow, and less so in A Better Tomorrow 2 because it gets expanded because of Dean Sheck's character. But we're back to having a trio here, and these three characters and their relationships and the relationship to the world around them are so incredibly important. And I think that that's the thing, right? That the tapestry that this film creates based off of the environment that these characters are in and the way they relate to it helps to define them and their choices as we go on. This is a film that's being made in 1989 in mainland China. You have the Tiananmen Square protests and massacre. This film, of course, is going to be viewed through that lens in Hong Kong when it's released in October of '89. You're also coming to the end of the '80s. The '90s are about to begin. There's this ominous feeling, this feeling of uncertainty in Hong Kong, knowing that 1997 is closer than it's ever been before, and that the handover to mainland China will take place. What will happen? Will we be free? Are we the same people? Are we one? Are we not? And I think that that's the thing that's so incredible about using Vietnam as a setting, and Vietnam at this particular point in time. That idea of alienation and identity, this backdrop of war and bloodshed, of life not seeming precious at all, seeming frivolous. You have to enjoy and embrace the happiness that you get when you get it, because you never know when it's going to come again. All of those things come into play in the film so wonderfully. And of course, we even get a scene of a man standing in front of a tank at one point. Tank Man, of course, that's actually a separate incident from Tiananmen Square, but it happened right after Tiananmen Square and kind of adjacent to Tiananmen Square. But it is an iconic image from that time. And I was 8 years old when I saw that. And I think that for a lot of people, seeing that image and so closely relating it to that unrest, that political unrest, and the student demonstrators and the protesters and the violence that occurred, and, the death toll that some theorize was, potentially in the thousands. The official stance is a few hundred, but even then, regardless, you get to a point where it's like, can you really tell me what the difference is in the loss of human life when you get, to such a high number? So I think that that this film kind of as an origin story for Mark is interesting for sure, but it goes even beyond that to the point where I'm left wondering, does it need to be a Better Tomorrow 3? What if this movie was just Love and Death in Saigon starring Chow Yun-fat and Anita Moy? I think that this is a film that deserves a reevaluation. It deserves a recontextualization, and I hope that this having the 4K Ultra HD release, having this new Shout Factory Cinema Classics release will absolutely give us that, because it's so deserving of that. And I genuinely think that this is an opportunity to reevaluate what is a really wonderful film. The way it's shot, Tsui Hark's use of low angles, of skewed camera angles, of close-ups, slow motion, which obviously, is in part due to John Woo and the visual tapestry and visual language that he put together for the first Better Tomorrow movie, and picks up on that, is also its own thing. It's Tsui Hark, it's not John Woo. And I think that it's brilliantly shot. Again, the documentary style, almost filmmaking that we get for some of these scenes, including the protest scenes early on, when they're fleeing Vietnam at the end, getting onto the helicopter, going to the U.S. Army base. Like, so much of this movie is done with such a unique visual style that sets it apart from the other two movies. John Woo has a unique visual style, one to be appreciated, helped to create a language that he is still building, as we see Better Tomorrow 2, The Killer, Hard Boiled, that he's growing this cinematic language, that he's growing this style that people will ape for years to come, even now. But Tsui Hark, the thing that's remarkable is he didn't do that. He said, I'm Tsui Hark, I'm going to direct this the way that I see this film. And it's all the more remarkable for it, and it's a visceral experience, it's a moving experience, and I really do genuinely love the movie. I think that the loss that these characters experience, the threat of a loss, the doom, the almost nihilistic feeling that pervades the movie, again, is not something that is unfamiliar to Hong Kong filmgoers. And we're talking about a generation of Shaw Brothers pictures where the hero dies in the end. Take a look at the Bruce Lee movies, right, early on, where he dies in the end, right? And I think that is something that, as we're watching this movie, even A Better Tomorrow 1, Mark dies in the end, and this film, it plays with some of that stuff as well. There's a moment in the film where, after Uncle has died, and they're confronted with kind of this choice. It's like, do you choose violence? Do you choose to run away, to escape, to have your freedom? What choice are you going to make here? And so much of that is, of course, tied up to this romantic subplot, this love story between Mark and Kit. And I think that it's a bit of a doomed love story, from the outset. She arguably doesn't really love Ho anymore, but she feels sort of beholden to him in a way, which is funny because she saved his life, right? But she's kind of honoring his work, and now that he's gone and has disappeared, and as she's kind of honoring his work, she meets this new man, and this new man can't necessarily give himself completely to her, because he thinks that his cousin Mun is in love with her, and Mun thinks that she's in love with him. So it's this unique triangle, and we get some interesting scenes with dramatic tension and the romantic subplots there that take place. The violence that comes kind of sudden and quick, and when it happens, like the tension gets ratcheted up. And again, we get these amazing action set pieces. We get some wonderful, like, bullet ballet, heroic bloodshed style stuff. Undoubtedly, it's really great, and it's very cool. But again, the stakes just feel a little higher here. We get some criminal activity. We get all of the hallmarks of A Better Tomorrow 1 and 2, but this film just feels a little weightier in some ways. And I really, really enjoyed the film. I appreciated the film. I was moved by the film. And again, I just think that it deserves a reevaluation. And by the time we get to the end of the movie, and we see Mark coming off the plane in the dark gray duster that Kit has given him, the sunglasses that Kit has given him with the matchstick in his mouth, we start to see the character that he will become, and he's seeking revenge, he's seeking retribution, and you know, one of the first out and out moments of violence that we get from him, he's fired a gun before. We see him, you know, arguably kill the first person that he's probably ever killed, use a gun for the first time, all of these sorts of things. You know, we see throughout the course of the film, some of it to comedic effect in the first time he handles a weapon, and now, but this visceral moment of violence when he assaults Kit because he thinks that Michael has been killed and he thinks it's her fault. So we just get some incredible moments of storytelling and character growth in the film, and again, the stakes just feel so high because there's this pervasive quality of loss, which is something that the first two films do as well, and do very, very well also. Not a knock, but I don't know, there's something that spoke to me about this movie historically, contextually, and it made me hungry to learn more about this experience from this perspective. It gave me a different perspective on something that I have some familiarity with. I have a working knowledge of, right? I've read books about Vietnam. I've seen Ken Burns' documentary, you know, I've seen Vietnam movies before, but always through a very Western lens. Even those projects like Ken Burns, for instance, Vietnam, that tries to bring a Vietnamese lens to it as well. This is a very different lens. You know, this is a Vietnamese born Hong Kong filmmaker's lens, really. And even though, you know, Tsui Hark would say, hey, this isn't about my experience. You know, I liken that to when Tolkien says that the Lord of the Rings books aren't about his World War I experience. I call a little bit of bullshit on that. You know, it's like that had an influence on the choices that you make, on the stories that you tell, and the way that you choose to tell them. And so, you know, there's a reason why he went back to Vietnam here. There's a reason why he filmed in Vietnam. It's one of the first foreign films to film in Vietnam since the war had ended. Some just really incredible, powerful stuff into the making of the movie, much less what we see on screen. And again, by the time we get to the finish of the film, the helicopter's taking off, Song for Sunset by Anita is playing in the background. Kit is dying in Mark's arms. Pat, who, you know, I failed to mention earlier, is the Vietnamese boy that Michael's father takes in to help him run his herbal drugstore in Saigon. And he's become a soldier in the time that they've fled Vietnam back to Hong Kong, and now they're returning, of course, and they do come in contact with him again. And he's going to flee with them. At the last moment, he jumps off the helicopter. He's taking off his uniform because, you know, they're telling him to, you know, you don't want to be found out that you're a soldier. They're raising the North Vietnamese flag. You know, Kit again is dying in Mark's arms, and again, you know, the way that the film ends, Mark isn't Mark yet, right? But he's on his way. You know, he's made choices that have set him down that path, and I think that that's the thing that these films have always been about, is choice. That the environment that you live in forces you to make choices, but you make the choice, right? And that we're all looking for a better tomorrow, right? And that in some ways, this film I think gets the meaning of a better tomorrow, that title, more than even the other two films do in some ways. But yeah, it's just, again, it's a brilliant movie. I think it deserves to have a reevaluation. I hope that, you know, in the midst of getting this beautiful release on 4K Ultra HD from Shout Factory, that it gets that reevaluation, that we're able to appreciate this film. Again, if it was in a vacuum, if Love and Death in Saigon were not A Better Tomorrow 3, I do wonder what our appreciation of the film would look like. I do wonder what we would think of this film compared to maybe what we think of it now, based off of it being a prequel, you know, and what we have thought of it historically. So just an incredible film. I loved it. Do I love it more than the first Better Tomorrow? I don't know. They feel like such different movies in a lot of ways. And, you know, Chow Yun-fat's visceral, incredible, searing performance as Mark in the first Better Tomorrow. T. Long as Ho. Leslie Chung. I mean, Leslie Chung, just this beautiful young Leslie Chung as Kit, and, you know, in the first two films. And, you know, we get so much out of that, out of those films, right? And I think that the first film feels a little bit more like a crime thriller action movie, with bits of drama, you know, thrown in. The second movie is kind of this bonkers mess of an action film with dramatic bits thrown in, and then this movie is instead this, you know, kind of this romantic period drama with these explosive bits of action thrown in, and I really, really appreciate it. It spoke to me in a different way. It recontextualized events for me in a different way. It made me hungry to learn more. And I just think, yeah, I think overall it's such a great film. It's shot beautifully. It looks gorgeous in 4K. It gets my highest recommendation. It genuinely does. And I hope that, everyone will go and check it out. Hopefully we can start a conversation about why A Better Tomorrow 3 is an incredibly underrated classic of Hong Kong cinema, and why it might just be the best of the Better Tomorrow films. Did I say that? I don't know. It's hard for me to decide. I can't. How can I say that? I love the first movie so much. There are elements of the second movie that I love more than anything in, the original movie or the prequel. But Better Tomorrow 3, just, I don't know, it hit me. It hit me in a way that perhaps the other two did not. And I appreciate it so much for that. That said, I'm having such a great time doing these. I can't wait to continue this. Of course, Hong Kong Cinema Classics will continue with The Killer, which releases in just a few days. I'm so excited about that. I cannot wait. It should be on my doorstep soon. And as soon as it is, I will be watching it on my UB820 Panasonic 4K Ultra HD player, on my OLED C3 LG television, and I will be telling you all about it, what I think about how great it looks, hopefully, about what, my experience with the film has been, because it's a movie that I remember, in the same way that I do Hard Boiled. And so I'm just having so much fun doing this. I hope that you are too. I hope you're enjoying it. I really appreciate all your support. I appreciate all the comments. It's really helped to spur on some great conversations, and I really want to continue that. So leave a comment below, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. There's more on the way. In fact, I got a package yesterday, and in that package, let's see here, fittingly, Armor of God, the first one on Blu-ray. This isn't 4K. Of course, they're probably going to announce a 4K now that I picked up the Blu-ray. This is a limited edition book, disc, everything. This is from 88 Films. Can't wait to unbox this. It's still sealed, and unbox that for the channel. Maybe talk a little bit about that movie. I also got another Jackie Chan film, Miracles. This is 4K Ultra HD, 88 Films. We got a book in there, poster in there. We'll definitely be talking about that one. And then something a little bit different. This is Hideo Gosho's Samurai Wolf, Volume 1 and 2. This is from Film Movement Classics, partner label with Vinegar Syndrome. Beautiful slipcover. Also unsealed, so we'll definitely be taking a closer look at all three of those films. I also have my retro unboxing of Star Trek, the motion picture, the director's cut. Again, that's from my friend Albie and his GoFundMe for his daughter's trip to space camp. We're going to be doing that. I have a video coming up soon with JJ Lindell in association with Fandom Entanglement. I'll be talking a little bit about Sliders, the old science fiction television show from Fox and the Sci-Fi Channel. And of course, much, much more on the way. But I will get into the Taiwanese cut of Better Tomorrow 3 at some point, and I will certainly be taking a look at that work print version of A Better Tomorrow 2, which comes recommended by one of the commenters. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. But yes, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, all the things the YouTubers say in order to get this out there and get more people talking and involved in this great conversation, which we will continue to have. Obviously, Hong Kong film has definitely been the thrust of what we've been talking about right now, because I got all these great Hong Kong cinema classics, Blu-rays, and 4Ks to look at. But there's definitely going to be, as you can tell, some divergences, some pathways elsewhere. That's why it's fate's wide wheel. Who knows where it's going to take us? In the meantime, please take care of yourselves, take care of one another, stay safe out there, and always, always leap responsibly.